Hello everybody and thank you for joining me. This is Sierra from Sierra T Designs and today we're going to try two new products that I had a lot of fun with. So let's jump right in. So to start, I am showing you this We Are Memory Keepers. This is the Slimline envelope punch board. Actually, I think it's just the Memory Keepers Slimline punch board because it makes bases, which is what we're making right here. And that piece of cardstock is 8.5 by 7 inches. And then it scores in the center. All the measurements are actually on the punch board as well, but I will let you know what they are as we make them. But so I am going to use it to make my base. It makes a base and an envelope for a regular slimline and a large slimline, which is the one I'm making, a mini slimline. And I'm making the regular size slimline here. And I'm just showing you that I did create 2 layers for it, and we're going to work on the top panel. So for the top panel, I have a piece of mixed media cardstock, the heavyweight stuff from Tim Holtz, and it's the white one. And then I'm going to spray on some water, and then I'm going to spray on a little bit of Saltwater Taffy Distress Oxide spray. So I just really wanted to kind of create a fun, colorful background for this. This card, honestly, I didn't really have a plan. I knew that I wanted to play with some products that were super new to me and new in general. The We Are Memory Slimline punch board is new. The Saltwater Taffy is a new color. And then I play with some distressed glazes that are new for me as well. So it was just kind of a fun card to play with. And I wasn't really sure where we were going to go. So bear with me as we kind of build this card up. But I did have a lot of fun here. So I did bring in my heat tool. This is just to speed the drying process. You could let it dry on its own. I chose not to because I'm impatient and because I want to add texture paste, and it can't be wet when I add the texture paste, or the texture paste won't dry, and then I have to wait for, I'm too impatient for that. So I have the heat tool, I heated it up, and then I brought in some Ranger Opaque Matte texture paste, and I just put it across 3 places on my base there, my panel. And I have the Tim Holtz Bubble Layering stencil, which is what I went through it. And then I have several colors of the Distress Glaze here. I have the Picked Raspberry, Candied Apple, Wild Honey, Twisted Citron, Salty Ocean, and Wilted Violet. And you see I have this mini spoon. I know Tim Holtz does it with his fingers, but you guys know I have long nails. So instead of getting a whole bunch of glaze stuck in my nails and getting it all over the place, I just have this teeny spoon that I used. I'm not even sure where this came from, to be honest with you. If I can find one, I will link it. Otherwise, it's just this wee spoon that I don't even know where it came from. I think a friend of mine actually gave it to me a while ago. So that's what I used to apply all the Distress Glaze. And then I did tap the bottom like Tim Holtz shows you in his live, so that it doesn't just all mix together and make brown. It kind of just helps you tap off the excess color. And then I am going to set this aside because it needs to dry. That texture paste has to dry before we heat set it, or it bubbles. So it's going to sit aside. We're going to do everything else. It's going to be one of the last things we touch again. So I am going to stamp out the big, beautiful floral image from Beautiful Flower stamp set by Simon Says Stamp. And I'm stamping it in Versafine, but I am going to clear heat emboss it just because I like that look. You could absolutely leave it like this. I just like the look of the embossing powder. So I chose to heat emboss it just because I can, mostly. You could have stamped it out in a different color as well. This is just because I did create that black mat to go behind it, and I just wanted to add a little more black into the card. So I'm going to heat set that until it's smooth and melted. You can see that I did miss the tip of that one leaf. Honestly, I thought I was going to cut it off, so it didn't really matter. I don't know that it really matters regardless, but if that bothers you, you could flip this over and stamp it again. But I don't really care, and I don't know. Tell me in the finished card if you even really notice that it's not there, other than I've pointed it out to you, right? So, and because you guys know how much I love dimension, I brought in 3 markers. I have an N1, an N3, and an N5 Copic marker, and I'm just going to add shadowing anywhere a petal is sitting on top of another petal. I'm only doing this to the flowers, but this is just going to add some dimension to the image. Don't get me wrong, the artist of this image is just amazingly talented, because this image is stunning. It is one of my favorite Simon Says Stamp sets, and this came out 2 years ago in a kit. I think it came out in 2019. I could be wrong, of course, but I think it came out in a kit in 2019. So I've had this stamp set for quite a while, and it's still one of my favorites. I still end up reaching for it quite often because it's just stunning. It's just a beautiful beautiful image, and it can be easily transformed into something vintage or something colorful. I've done rainbows with it. I've done many things with this stamp set, and it's one of my favorite stamp sets. So I did just bring in those 3 Copic markers and just added some dimension around the leaves. I'll hold it up here so you can see it. It's subtle. Or sorry, I don't hold it up. I'm going to hold it up at the end. It's a subtle addition, but I think that it adds a little extra life. And that's one of the things that I love about images like this, because it is going to stay black and white. That is because the background is going to be very colorful. So I wanted my focal to kind of be black and white and catch your eye in a different way. And then I do own the matching dies for this stamp set. And I took the big die that cut out the floral, cut it out. And then I also cut out 2 more layers in just a scratch piece of white cardstock I had left, and then I'm going to layer it up. So I've got 3 layers of cardstock. Keep in mind though, that this cardstock is very heavyweight. This is the cardstock I usually make bases out of. So this cardstock is like 110 pounds, and then I have 2 layers of that, and then I have the heavyweight white cardstock, which I think is another 120 pounds. So this is quite thick, which I think is cool because it gives you that kind of chipboard effect. And by this point, my panel is dry, so I am going to go in and melt the distress glazes. So if you didn't wait, if you did this too early, your texture paste will bubble up and pop through the distress glaze, so it doesn't give you quite the same effect. Now, granted, it would probably be a neat effect for a different project, but for this one, I didn't want that. So I did let it sit, and I also try not to leave the heat on any area very long. And then when we got to the sentiment, I decided I really wanted to use my Honeybee Thanks Buzzword stamps and dies, and I didn't have a matching color of cardstock for the part of the sentiment, so I just wiped a piece of that cardstock with that taffy, saltwater taffy color, just to create a cardstock that matched the color from the background that I really wanted to showcase. And I did cut the little background of the word out in vellum. Excuse me. This is just so that I could have something differentiated from the background, because the background is that same color. So I want my word to stand out on its own, but I also want it to kind of blend in, if that makes sense. Like the sentiment is not my focus on this card. So, I mean, either you can choose the background as your focal, or you can choose this really pretty black and white floral as your kind of focal. So it kind of decides what it wants to be. I love how this card turned out. It was a little different for me, a little different style, but still bold, vibrant colors, still a lot of fun to play with and look at. It's super shiny. You guys will see that here in a second as we get a little further in, but I'm pretty excited about how it turned out. So there I just glued my 2 layers together with my Barely Art glue because it has a super fine tip. And then I used my Nuvo Deluxe glue for anything that had thicker glue lines. So my layers, I used Nuvo Deluxe glue. And I am going to glue this part down first, just because of course my panel had some warping to it. I mean, I did add a fair amount of water and then the paste, which was, gives it moisture. So just a way to make sure that all of my layers adhere nicely. I adhered them first, and then I put my Misti on top of them, just because it sits on my desk and it's heavy. So, I mean, you could absolutely put anything that's heavy on this, a book or whatever, but my Misti sits there and it's flat. So I have a tendency to use it as a weight when I need layers to stay together properly. And then here I brought my Barely Art glue back in, just because, again, there are super thin lines behind the lettering, and I didn't want the glue to seep out onto the vellum because you can't see it. But I mean, it's not the end of the world if you get some. I get some often. It's not a big deal. I don't shoot for perfection in my cards. I shoot for happiness. Like I look at it and it makes me smile, then I've achieved kind of what I was after, or, the person I'm sending it to, so I mean, it's up to you what you're after, of course, but I mean, I just try to make things that make me smile. So that's this card in a nutshell. We have bright colors, we have some rainbow going on, we have a big floral, like it's just so pretty in the end. And then I did adhere everything down flat because I've created layers with the added cardstock. And of course I had to bring in my Spectrum Noir glitter pen to add it on top of all the flowers. This won't do anything to your Copic markers because of course they're alcohol ink based, so you don't have to worry about any of that shifting. But if you used something else to color these in, like an Oxide or Distress ink, it of course would shift because they're water soluble. So do be aware of that if you color these in a different way, but with alcohol markers, that'll never be a concern because water does not shift alcohol. So I just covered them all in this Spectrum glitter pen, and then I'm pretty sure that I add some, I'm going to add some Moonshine sequins to my card. Now again, these are all added things. You don't need them, but I love all the sparkly pretty things, so I do have a tendency towards adding those to my cards. Again, it's just personal preference. Whatever you like to do on your cards, you could absolutely do. And of course, you could have added something that was less subtle. I went for a very clear sequin just because I wanted that extra shine without it drawing your eye as much. So, I mean, I still think the star of the show really is the big floral cluster, but I mean, it's kind of, I like to add all the sparkly things. So whatever I can add that adds a little extra shine, I'm there. And then we're going to build the envelope. So that We Are Memory Keepers Slimline punch board also does an envelope. So the envelope needs to measure 11.5 by 9 inches. So this is a 12 piece of cardstock that's 12 by 12. And I'm going to cut it down to be the right size. And then this takes a second to figure out. So you line it up in the corner, and you use the little knife piece that kind of cuts around. And then here I was a little confused as to how I was supposed to line up the scoring line. So I lift up the little lever thing, and I chose to pull out the piece that we had cut off. It made it way easier for me to see what I was trying to cut. So I just lined it back up to the line that had the cut blade area, and then I just used my bone folder to trace the lines. And then it was super easy. The only thing with this, and I have heard some people complain, is that you do have to flip it over. Oh, sorry, I just hit my mic. You do have to flip it over because it's not a square, it's a rectangle. So to get the exact same cuts on each side, you have to flip the cardstock, right? I know that people were complaining about that because it doesn't directly say that in the instructions. And if you guys want a more in-depth look at this tool, let me know and I can do a video specifically slowed down, more looking at how the tool works. But just keep in mind, if you have one, if you're going to use it, make sure you flip your cardstock because it's not a square, it's a rectangle. So to get the same cut on both sides, you have to cut from both sides. I hope that makes sense. If not, please leave me some questions and I will totally answer them. But I actually really enjoyed it. It was super easy to use once I figured it out. And I think that it's a little more easy for me to use than I have a set of Trinity Slimline envelope builder. This is easier for me because this, I just cut down a piece of cardstock and then I adhere it together. Like all the steps are done pretty quickly and easily. But if you don't have like a slimline die or something like that, I think this is almost an easier way, especially to me personally. And then I really wanted to stamp the floral image on my slimline envelope. It does not fit in my Misti, so because I can't hang the image off of it. That's the only reason it doesn't fit in the Misti. I own the big memory Misti. My husband gave it to me for Christmas 2 years ago, and I don't use it as much as I should. So I usually use it with slimline cards, and I haven't been making many slimline cards recently, so I busted it out and I used it to stamp on the envelope, and I'm also going to stamp on the inside of my slimline card base. And then I'm going to hold them both up here so you can see them. And I did stamp them in the same Saltwater Taffy. So I'm going to show you a close-up look of this card. I love how it turned out. I would love to know what you guys think of this card. Is it a bit too out there for you? Is it, what do you think? I don't know. I'm pretty excited about it. Oh, and I did have to trim off those leaves because they didn't fit in the envelope. So there we go, guys. That is the video I have for you today. I hope that you will consider subscribing, leave me a like, leave me a comment, and I will see you guys again very soon. Thank you so much, guys. Bye-bye for now.